Get your junk out of this office. The 24-year-old MBA smirked. We are rebranding. I made one call. 10 minutes later, a tow truck hooked the CEO's Ferrari. What are you doing? What are you doing? He screamed. The driver pointed at me. The parking lot owner revoked your lease. All cars go. The memory of the future I planned, the climax I had yet to earn, was the only thing keeping the air in my lungs right now. The present was far colder. The air conditioning in the conference room was producing that familiar grating rattle, the specific death rattle of a compressor that needed replacing. I should know. I had negotiated the maintenance contract for that very unit 6 years ago, detailing the exact specifications and preventative measures required. But right now, the only thing louder than the dying equipment was the sound of my own utility evaporating. Trevor Phillips sat at the head of the polished mahogany table, mahogany I personally sourced from a sustainable supplier back in 2014. He was wearing a suit that looked both expensive and ill-fitting, like a mannequin that had been styled by a drunken algorithm. He tapped his aggressive, manicured fingers on a stack of files. My files. So, Timothy. He began pronouncing my name with a little curl of his lip, like he was testing the flavor of stale milk. We are pivoting. Pivoting? I repeated. My voice was flat, hollowed out. I didn't smoke, but in moments like this I felt the familiar burn of banked adrenaline, the kind of stillness that usually precedes a severe weather event. Trevor beamed, his aggressively white teeth reminding me of chiclets cemented into a shark's jaw. Exactly. The board feels that operations director is a very legacy title. It gives off 2005 energy. We are moving toward a holistic workspace experience model. We need fresh eyes, digital natives, people who understand that a building is not just walls. It is a vibe. I stared at him, letting the silence stretch. I am 45 years old. I have managed 3 million square feet of commercial real estate in the hottest commercial district in Nevada for 11 years. I have navigated floods, fires, EA raids on tenants, and a CEO who tried to expense a stripper pole as structural support. I know every easement, every utility line, and every zoning loophole within a 50-mile radius. And this child, whose resume probably listed proficiency in TikTok as a hard skill, was talking to me about vibes. Trevor, I said, leaning back in the chair which creaked under my weight. I manage the physical reality of this company, including the lease you are sitting on. I renegotiated that rider 6 months ago to save us $40,000 a year on property tax. That is not a vibe. That is math. He waved a dismissive hand, as if swatting away a persistent, boring insect. And that is great, Timothy. Really super thankful for your service, but we are bringing in a new team. My team. We are rebranding the entire park, the Nexus. It is going to be huge. And frankly, your contract, it does not fit the new aesthetic. The silence that followed was suffocating. It was the kind of silence that had ended my father's career 20 years ago when a young executive decided his experience was too expensive. The memory of my father, diminished and broken by that moment of corporate disposal, killed the last ounce of professional courtesy in my mind. This wasn't about efficiency. This was about protecting my worth. You are firing me, I stated. We are sunsetting your role, he corrected, flashing that blinding grin. Effective immediately. HR has already processed the paperwork. Severance is, well, per the standard clause, 2 weeks. We need your badge and your laptop now, 2 weeks. 11 years of my life. 11 years of keeping this glass and steel monstrosity from collapsing under the weight of its own ego, and I get 2 weeks of pay and a kick in the teeth. My blood turned to slush. It wasn't sadness. It was a cold, sharp crystal clarity. I needed leverage, not a lawyer. I did not scream, I did not cry. I did not throw the lukewarm cucumber water at his head, though I perfectly calculated the trajectory needed to shatter the glass against his temple. I simply stood up. Great. Love the attitude. Trevor chirped, mistaking my stillness for compliance. He spun his new laptop around. I will just need you to sign this NDA on the tablet outside. Oh, and Timothy, please get your personal junk out of this office by noon. We have the painters coming in at 1 o'clock. Going for Arctic gray on the walls. I walked out of the conference room. My heels clicked on the polished concrete floor like gunshots. My hands did not shake. They were steady as rock. I had been fired, dismissed, and declared irrelevant. But as I walked toward my corner office, I realized something important. Trevor had been too busy high-fiving himself to follow proper corporate protocol. He had terminated my employee status, but he hadn't yet cut the digital throat. My admin access was still live. I grabbed a supply box, emptied my personal effects, and walked past Trevor's triumphant face. He was still gloating about Arctic gray paint. I knew one thing: I would not fight him on his stage. I would fight him on mine. I drove straight home. I didn't stop at a bar to drown my sorrows or seek comfort from my sister. I had too much of my father in me for that. When the company my father built was sold out from under him in his late 50s, he let the shock kill him slowly. He treated his value as if it were disposable. I would not make that mistake. My house, a quiet, organized stucco box, was my fortress, and I was going straight to the armory. My armory was a spare bedroom that held not a Peloton, but a decade's worth of carefully filed cardboard boxes. I have a habit, born of paranoia and experience, of keeping hard copies. Every major contract I ever negotiated, every addendum I signed, every city permit application a duplicate was filed away here. This wasn't professional duty. This was a direct response to a previous boss who tried to scapegoat me for a missing permit. I produced the signed copy and he shut up. Since then, I had become a hoarder of bureaucracy. I pulled out a heavy plastic bin from the bottom shelf, labeled Master Lease Land Used 2012 to present. Dust motes danced in the sliver of sunlight cutting through the blinds. I sat on the cold floor, ignoring the sudden ache in my knees. I flipped through the stacks of documents, past utility contracts and janitorial service agreements, searching for the bedrock. The business park, the gleaming glass boxes that housed Vortex Innovations, was not owned by the company itself. Corporations rarely owned their land. It tied up too much capital. No, the land was owned by a holding company, a shell entity created by the original founders back in the 1990s. The company that just fired me leased the land from that shell entity. I found it, a thick document bound with a rusted metal clip, the master ground lease agreement. I began to read, my eyes scanning the dense legal text that most people glaze over. To Trevor, this was boring boilerplate. To me, it was poetry. It was where the knives were hidden. I remembered a conversation from about 5 years ago. The old CEO, Mr. Henderson Sr., a man who was a tyrant but at least a competent one, had been worried about a hostile takeover. He wanted to ensure the land couldn't be sold out from under him, even by his own board. I found Clause 14b. Renewal of this master lease is contingent upon annual certification of compliance with City Zoning Ordinance 40. 4b said certification must be submitted and signed by the designated operations liaison. I ran my finger down the page, seeking the addendum filed 3 years ago. The designation was clear: designated operations liaison, Timothy J. Peterson. I froze. I read it again. It did not say the current operations director or the person holding the operations role. It said my name, Timothy J. Peterson, personally. Old man Henderson had trusted me more than his own board of directors, using my name to ensure that if anyone tried to screw with the property, they would have to go through me. He died 2 years ago. His idiot son, the current CEO, had never read the old contracts. Trevor definitely had not. I checked the dates. The annual certification was due. Today was October 12th. The certification was due October 15th, in 3 days. According to Clause 14c, the nuclear option clause that old man Henderson had inserted to poison the well for potential raiders. If the certification lapsed, the lease terminated immediately, and the property rights reverted to the shell entity's control. And who was the registered agent for that shell entity? Highland Land Holdings, LC. I scrambled to another box, labeled LOC Correspondence. 6 months ago, the company's senile lawyer in Reno had retired and transferred the administrative power of attorney for the shell company's day-to-day operations to the current site manager to save on fees. Me. Again. Technically, legally, and contractually, I held the entire skeleton key to the company's physical existence, and they had just thrown me out. A dry, jagged laugh bubbled up in my throat. Trevor was picking out Arctic gray paint colors for the walls. He was worried about the vibe. Meanwhile, the entire legal foundation of his shiny new office was resting on a piece of paper currently sitting on my lap, 3 days away from expiration. I wasn't just an employee they fired. I was the load-bearing wall they just took a sledgehammer to. The shock gave way to an intellectual triumph, a cold surge of power. This was my expertise, my knowledge of the boring minutiae, paying dividends. I was not disposable. I was indispensable. Now, I just needed to know if the city still recognized my signatory status for the smaller, easier permits. If the main lease was the nuclear bomb, the smaller permits were tactical missiles. The discovery of the nuclear option clause gave me the structural advantage, but I needed emotional fuel. Vengeance required motive beyond just my own firing. I put the lease document aside and opened my laptop. I made the mistake of checking my phone first. I didn't use social media often, but I followed the company account for monitoring purposes. A new story was up, a video shaky, vertical format. It started with a close-up of Trevor's face, filtered to look like a poreless dolphin. "What is up, Nexus family?" he shouted. Drills hammered loudly in the background. "We are day one into the transformation." He panned the camera. They were in the main lobby, a crew of young people, wearing t-shirts that said Task Rabbit or something similar, were ripping out the massive, custom-built mahogany reception desk. That desk had cost $12,000. They were smashing it with sledgehammers and laughing. Then the camera swung to a pile of debris in the corner. My heart seized. Sitting on top of broken drywall and wood was a framed photo. It was a picture of the original groundbreaking ceremony from 20 years ago. Old man Henderson, the mayor, and me, fresh out of college, wearing a terrible oversized blazer holding shovels. Trevor zoomed in on the photo. "Literal fossils," he narrated, chuckling. "Goodbye to the boomer energy. We are manifesting future vibes only." He then kicked the frame. The glass shattered. I put my phone down on the table very gently. "Boomer energy, I'm 45, you little Gen Z, we don't manifest. We survive." I was no longer fighting for professional respect. I was fighting because he had desecrated my history. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from Miller HVSC Miller Kowalski, the head of the maintenance crew I'd hired 5 years ago. He was an honest guy, a chain smoker with a good work ethic. His text read, "Hey boss, new kid Trevor just fired us. Said our uniforms aren't on brand. Brought in some guys from a gig app. They don't even have tools. Just wanted to say thanks for the work over the years." Below that, Miller sent a screenshot of an invoice. Subject: unpaid services August/September. Amount due $14,500. Beneath the invoice was a screenshot of an email from Trevor. "Hey Miller. Yeah, we are auditing past invoices. Since we are terminating the vendor relationship, we are putting a hold on all payouts until we verify the work was actually essential." The vibe of the AC was kind of off anyway. "We will circle back in Q4. The vibe of the AC was off. Miller, a man who bought his work boots at Walmart because he spent his money on his daughter's braces, was being stiffed on $15,000 because Trevor didn't like the vibe of the compressor. That was it. That was the moment the scale tipped. Before this, I was going to leverage the lease for a better severance package and a public apology. Now, I wanted to burn their village down. I opened my laptop right there on my dining room table. I pulled up a new spreadsheet. I named the tab the butcher's bill. I started listing everything: the unpaid invoices to Miller, the unpaid invoices to the landscape crew I knew they had also fired, the fire code violations they were creating by tearing down structural walls, and the labor violations of using unlicensed gig workers for commercial demolition. I needed more ammunition. I needed the internal communications, the proof of malice. When Trevor had revoked my access, he probably just deleted my Active Directory profile. He didn't know about the door I left in case of emergency. Every system has a door left open. With Trevor, that door was arrogance and incompetence. I opened the remote access portal. I typed in the legacy admin account, created in 2010 for the IT migration. Username admin root. Password SBUR200. I'd never used it. It was the break glass in case of emergency login connecting. Verifying. My breath hitched. If they had updated the firewall, this wouldn't work. Login successful. I was in. I was inside their network, moving in ghost mode. I navigated straight to the finance folder and found a file titled Rebranding Budget/Cost Cutting. Strategy. Delay vendor payments to boost Q3 liquidity for launch party. Strategy. Replace legacy ops management high salary with junior brand ambassadors low salary. Target savings $250,000. And then the kicker and line item for the launch event. Ferrari rental for CEO entrance $4,000. Champagne Tower $8,000. They were stealing Miller's money to rent a Ferrari for Mr. Henderson. I downloaded everything. Every memo, every budget sheet, every smug email where they joked about the old cow me and the grease monkeys, Miller. I had the map, I had the lease, and now I had the righteous, overwhelming motive. I texted Miller back. Friday, 10 a.m., bring the truck and bring a tow hitch. Miller replied instantly. I'm in. Who are we fixing? I looked at the text message. We are not fixing anything, I typed. We are breaking everything. I had the motive and the ammunition, but I was an operations manager, not a litigator. To deploy the nuclear option, I needed a legal pit bull. I needed someone who operated out of a strip mall next to a vape shop and knew how to weaponize a comma. I needed Gary. Gary's office was in a complex that smelled of sun-baked asphalt and Subway sandwiches. His waiting room had a flickering fluorescent light and a stack of Golf Digest magazines from 2018. When I walked in, Gary, wearing a rumpled suit, shouted, Timothy, to what do I owe the pleasure? Finally ready to sue the HOA about the palm trees. Bigger, Gary. Much bigger. I didn't waste time with small talk. In his office, I laid out the evidence. The original master ground lease, the personal signatory clause, the download of Trevor's arrogant budget emails, and the butcher's Bill Miller's unpaid invoice. Gary adjusted his glasses, picked up the lease, and read Clause 14C. He read it again. A slow, terrifying grin spread across his face. The nuclear option. He whispered reverently. I haven't seen one of these drafted since the 90s. This is beautiful, Timothy. It's archaic, draconian, but completely enforceable because the original signatory, Mr. Henderson Sr., is dead and the trust never amended it. Can we do it? I asked. Do it. Gary laughed. We can destroy them, but we have to be surgical. If we move too early, they get an injunction. If we move too late, they claim implied consent. We need to hit them when the company's legal department is utterly distracted by the launch party. We pulled up the city planning files, which I had retrieved from Barb, my long-time contact in the Department of Building and Safety, before coming to Gary's office. Barb had confirmed my suspicions. The lease on the auxiliary lot, the one they used for VIP parking, was month to month and the permit was still in my name as the site manager. So, I said, looking at the site map, if the master lease is dead, any vehicle on the premises is trespassing. Technically, Gary confirmed, wagging a finger. You are securing the asset, the land, against unauthorized use. You're protecting the shell company's property from squatters who are conducting unpermitted construction and parking illegally. The plan snapped into sharp focus. The lease renewal required my certification by October 15th. Today was the 12th. I was not going to certify it. Instead, we were going to file a notice of non-compliance and lease termination with the county clerk. When we file it, Gary said, tapping his yellow legal pad, Friday morning, 8:59 a.m. The moment the clerk's office opens. That gives them zero time to react before their little party starts at noon. Once that stamp is on the paper, I finished. The land rights revert to the shell company, which I administer. I can evict them. Gary stood up, and since you have the authorization for emergency restriction on the parking lot, you can also remove the vehicles effective immediately, under NVA Revised Statute 487.038. This is not a lawsuit, Timothy. This is a public execution. He looked me in the eye, the only moment of genuine concern he showed. But you know what happens when you pull this trigger, right? You'll never work in corporate real estate in this town again. I thought about Trevor laughing at my framed photo. I thought about Miller, counting the days until his daughter's braces were paid off, now facing an empty bank account. I don't want to work in corporate real estate again, Gary, I said. I'm thinking of getting into demolition. All right, then. Gary cracked his knuckles. Let's draft the death warrant. We spent the next 4 hours writing. Every comma, every reference had to be perfect. We drafted the notice to quit. We drafted the towing authorization orders. We drafted a cease and desist for the unauthorized use of the company logo on the newly pasted signage. By the time I left, The documents were crisp, weighty, and felt utterly radioactive. I checked my phone in the strip mall parking lot. Another Vortex Instagram notification. Trevor had posted a video sneak peek of the whip for Friday. He was sitting in the rented Ferrari, revving the engine, parked diagonally across 2 handicapped spaces in my lot. Spot number 1. He wasn't just parking in my spot. He was dancing on my grave. "Enjoy the ride, Trevor," I whispered. "You are about to run out of road. 36 hours to showtime." The legal papers, heavy and final, sat in my briefcase. Now the choreography of the collapse had to begin. Thursday morning, I walked into the post office at 9 o'clock sharp. I held a crisp white envelope addressed to the compliance officer at Vortex Innovations. This was the legal courtesy, the requirement to give 24 hours of constructive notice of the lease irregularity. It was a formality, but necessary for the court. I mailed it certified, return receipt requested. I knew exactly what would happen. The mail carrier would deliver it to the front desk at roughly 11 a.m. Trevor had fired the old receptionist and replaced her with a digital check in kiosk, a sign of the vibe, not security. Kayla, the experience coordinator, would likely pick it up, seeing compliance on the address. She would assume it was boring legal junk and toss it onto a pile to be scanned later. Trevor would never see it. The CEO would never see it. But the court would see that I sent it, satisfying the bare minimum of due process. I walked out of the post office and called Miller. "It's done," I said. "Copy that." Miller's voice was gravely. "I talked to my buddy at Red Rock Towing. Big S, he has 4 flatbeds and a wheel lift truck available for Friday morning. He says for a bulk job, he will give us a discount." "No discount." I corrected. "Full price. Bill it to the vehicle owners and Miller. Tell S to bring the heavy-duty truck, the one they use for semis. Why, you expecting a tank?" Miller asked. "No," I said. "But Mr. Henderson drives a Ferrari 488. It has very low clearance. I want to make sure we don't scratch it until it is on the hook. You are cold, boss." "I love it." Miller sounded genuinely gleeful. The transaction was clean and professional, built on a foundation of mutual trust and hatred of incompetence. I spent the rest of the day watching the train wreck unfold from a distance. Trevor was live streaming again, frantic now. "Okay, guys, minor hiccup," he was saying, sweating visibly through his tight shirt. "The caterer is giving us some grief about the net 60 payment terms. But we are pivoting. We are getting food trucks. Food trucks are way more authentic anyway." I smiled. The caterer was likely my friend Brenda. I had casually mentioned to her yesterday that Vortex's credit rating was looking shaky. Brenda does not play with her money. Trevor was running around the office, yelling at the TaskRabbit guys. "No, the banner goes over the old logo. We need to hide the Smith & Wesson sign. It is not on brand." He was pasting a vinyl banner over a stone monument that I knew was listed as a protected architectural feature in the city code. Another violation, added to the pile. The man was stacking illegalities like Jenga blocks. At 4 o'clock my phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Hello, is this Timothy Peterson?" A female voice, young and harried. "Hi, this is Kayla from, the Nexus, formerly Vortex. I am the new experience coordinator." I knew who she was. "I know who you are, Kayla. So, we are trying to set up the Wi-Fi for the outdoor press area, and the IT guy says we need the root password for the external router. He said you might have it." I paused. They were locked out of the outdoor internet. They couldn't live stream the event without it. This was the arrogance of the digital native, believing that the wireless network was the actual infrastructure. "I might," I said calmly. "But I don't work there anymore, Kayla." I believe Trevor said I was a legacy issue. I know," she whispered, sounding like she was hiding in a closet. "But Trevor is freaking out. He is screaming at everyone. Please, just give me the code." I felt a tiny pang of sympathy. She was just a kid, but she was a kid working on the Death Star. "I can't give you the code, Kayla. That would be a security breach. But tell Trevor that he should check the Master Ops folder on the shared drive, the one he was looking at when he fired me. The passwords are in there." "Oh, okay. Thank you." She hung up instantly. I smiled. I had left a file in that folder, but it wasn't the passwords. It was a PDF titled System Passwords, PDF. When he opened it, it would just be a single page, A picture of Danny DeVito holding a sign that said, "You pay the troll toll." Petty. Yes, professional. No, but I wasn't a professional anymore. I was a ghost, and ghosts are allowed to haunt. I went to bed early that night. I slept like a baby, the kind of baby that knows a nuclear missile is scheduled to launch at 8:59 a.m. Friday, the day of the Nexus launch party. The final commitment was due. At 8:30 a.m., I was standing in line at the Clark County Clerk's office. I was wearing my armor, a navy blue blazer, tailored slacks, and sensible leather heels. I looked like the operations director I had spent the last decade perfecting, the one who understood that competence was a uniform. I held the manila envelope containing the notice of lease termination. The clerk, a woman named Janice who had seen everything from quickie divorces to murder indictments, took the papers. I watched her hand move across the documents, tracing the final line. She took the official seal and, with a decisive clunk that echoed in the quiet room, she stamped them. Filed, October 14th, 8:59 a.m. It was official. As of that second, Vortex Innovations and its assumed name, the Nexus, had no legal right to occupy the parking lot or the common grounds of 400 Highland Drive. The ground had shifted beneath their expensive, rented feet. "Thank you, Janice," I said. "Give 'em hell, honey." She winked. I walked out to the parking lot. Miller was waiting in his Ford F-250. Behind him, 3 massive flatbeds from Red Rock Towing were idling, their diesel engines rumbling like hungry, waiting beasts. "We green?" Miller asked, leaning out the window. He was smoking a Marlboro Red. "We are green," I confirmed. "Move to the staging area, the abandoned Kmart lot down the street. Wait for my signal. The event starts at noon. We roll at 12:15. Copy," he said, and the convoy of vengeance rolled out, turning the corner in a slow, determined procession. I drove to the Vortex building alone. I parked across the street in the public lot of a neighboring strip mall. The setup was already underway. They had erected a massive white tent in the center of the parking lot, my parking lot. There were hundreds of balloons, a DJ booth, and a food truck selling artisanal tacos. And there, gleaming aggressively in the center of it all, was the Ferrari Cherry Red, parked diagonally across 2 handicapped spots. Perfect. I watched Mr. Henderson, the CEO, arrive in an Uber. He stepped out, looking sleek and oblivious in a linen suit. Trevor ran up to him, gesturing wildly, pointing at the tent, the balloons, and the overall vibe. Henderson clapped him on the back. They were celebrating. They were high-fiving. They had no idea that the ground beneath their feet had just turned into quicksand. I checked my watch. 11:30 a.m. The press was starting to arrive. A van from the local Channel 8 news station. A couple of bloggers with oversized cameras. This was exactly what Trevor had wanted: maximum media coverage. "Be careful what you wish for," I murmured. I opened my phone and sent the final email to the board of directors. I had drafted it last night. Subject: urgent compliance violation and asset seizure. "Dear board members, please be advised that due to failure to renew the master lease certification by the authorized liaison and failure to rectify outstanding zoning violations, the lease for the property at 400 Highland Drive has been terminated, effective 8:59 a.m. today. Furthermore, unauthorized vehicles on the property are subject to immediate removal under NRS 487.038. I strongly suggest you watch the news. Regards, Timothy J. Peterson, former Operations Director, current Administrator, Highland Land Holdings LLC. I hit send. I watched the building. It takes about 15 minutes for an email like that to filter through the corporate server, get read by an assistant, and then cause genuine bowel-loosening panic. 11:45 a.m. I saw a woman in a suit, the general counsel, run out of the building. She was on her phone, looking frantically around the parking lot, her eyes wide with shock. She spotted Trevor. She ran over to him, grabbed his arm, and thrust her phone at his face. I adjusted my binoculars. I could see Trevor's face. He looked confused, then annoyed. He waved her off, pointing at the cameras and the incoming crowd. He was clearly saying, "Not now." He ignored the warning. He ignored the law. He was too focused on his moment. The clock ticked closer to noon. Noon. The launch party began. The music started, a heavy bass thrumming through the air, completely inappropriate for a corporate real estate event. Trevor grabbed a microphone. "Welcome everyone to the Nexus," he screamed. The small crowd of investors, bloggers, and confused tenants clapped dutifully. I picked up my radio, a walkie-talkie I'd kept from my days coordinating construction crews. "Miller," I said, "it is showtime. Bring the rain. Copy that, boss." Miller's voice crackled, rolling heavy. I put my car in drive and pulled out of the strip mall lot. I did not head for the visitor spots. I drove straight up to the main gate. The security guard, a new young hire, stepped out to stop me. I held up my badge, not my former employee ID, but my city inspector liaison badge. "Official business," I said. He stepped back, the gate opened. I rolled in. Behind me, the tow trucks turned the corner. Their amber lights flashed, and their air horns blasted. The sound of 4 heavy-duty diesel engines cut through the chill-hop DJ set like a chainsaw through pudding. The music stopped instantly. Heads turned. The crowd fell silent. The wolf was in the fold. The largest truck, a monstrous Peterbilt with red rock towing painted aggressively on the side, pulled up right behind the cherry-red Ferrari 488. The air brakes hissed, a final, sharp sound that signaled the end of the party. Hey, what is this?" Trevor stammered, scrambling off the makeshift stage. His microphone squealed with feedback. "You can't be here. This is a private event." He ran toward me, his face sweaty and manic. "Timothy, what the hell are you doing? I told you to clear out." "I did clear out, Trevor," I said, my voice calm, projecting just enough for the news crews, who were now aiming their cameras, to hear. "I cleared out my personal effects. Now I am clearing out the unauthorized vehicles parked on private property." Mr. Henderson, the CEO, pushed through the crowd. "Private property? Timothy, have you lost your mind? We own this property." "Actually, Mr. Henderson," I said, pulling the stamped document from my folder, "you don't. You lease it. Or rather, you did lease it. As of 8:59 a.m., the lease was terminated due to non-compliance with Clause 14C. You are currently trespassing on land managed by Highland Land Holdings, LLC. Henderson stammered, his expensive linen suit suddenly looking flimsy. That is insane. "Who is the manager of this LLC?" "I am," I said. A camera flash went off, then another. The reporter from Channel 8 motioned for her cameraman to get closer. "Get security," Trevor yelled, pointing at Miller. "Security can't help you, sir," I said. "This is a civil enforcement action." I nodded at Miller. Miller grinned a grim, satisfied expression. He racked the slide on the hydraulic controls. The flatbed began to tilt. "Don't you touch that car," Trevor shrieked. "That's a rental." The deposit was $10,000. As I made one call, 10 minutes later, a tow truck hooked the CEO's Ferrari. "What are you doing?" he screamed. The driver pointed at me. The parking lot owner revoked your lease. All cars go." Miller, a man who has lifted air conditioning units onto roofs in 115-degree heat, didn't even flinch at the CEO screaming. He grabbed the heavy tow hook, knelt down, and found the tow eyelet on the low-clearance Ferrari. Clank. The sound of metal hooking metal rang out across the silent crowd. It was the sound of consequences arriving on time. "Lift it," I ordered. The winch whined, the cable tightened. The beautiful, arrogant cherry-red Ferrari shuddered and began to slide backward up the ramp. The crowd gasped. Someone in the back laughed. "This is a nightmare," Trevor shouted, clutching his hair. "You are ruining the brand launch." "The brand?" I looked at him. "Trevor, you don't have a brand. You have a logo and a lawsuit. You fired the people who actually ran this place. You stiffed the contractors who built it. And you forgot to read the contract that keeps the lights on." The Ferrari was now at a 45-degree angle, suspended in the air like a piece of abstract, expensive modern art. "Where are you taking it?" Henderson screamed, his face turning purple. "Impound Lot B," I said, checking my clipboard. "Cash only to release. And since it is Friday, they are closed until Monday morning." "Monday," Trevor cried out, sounding genuinely distraught. "You are paying daily on that pivot," I replied. The second tow truck moved in, heading for the artisanal taco truck. "Hey," the taco guy yelled. "I am just the caterer. Do you have a vending permit for this specific zone?" I asked. Trevor said he handled it." "Trevor lied," I said. "Hook it up." The chaos was absolute. The investors were retreating to their cars. The news crew was live streaming the entire thing. The Chiron on the Channel 8 feed likely reading. Corporate launch towed away. Trevor stood there, defeated, watching his vibe getting hauled away on a flatbed. Mr. Henderson turned to his general counsel. Fix this. Now. The lawyer Linda looked at the stamped papers I had handed her. She looked at me, then at the livid CEO. I can't, she said, her voice shaking. He is right. The lease is dead. Clause 14C, it is ironclad. Henderson looked at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. You planned this. I did, I admitted, meeting his gaze. I am an operations manager, Mr. Henderson. Logistics is my job, and frankly, I am very good at it. I turned and walked back toward my car. Where are you going? Henderson yelled after me. To lunch, I said. There is a great taco place across town. Since this one is indisposed, I got in my car. I did not look back, but I could hear the winch whining as the second truck claimed its prize. The air no longer felt cold with shock. It was hot, dry, and tasted exactly like victory. I drove straight home. I didn't go to lunch. I didn't need food. The adrenaline was a far more potent fuel. The feeling was not just victory, but a deep, profound self-determination. I poured myself a glass of whiskey, the good stuff, a bottle old man Henderson had given me 10 years ago for Christmas. I sat on my patio and watched the Twitter feed on my iPad. The chaos at the Vortex site was already national news. Hashtag the Nexus fail was trending locally, then nationally. The video of the cherry red Ferrari being dragged up the ramp was everywhere. Someone had already dubbed it with the Curb Your Enthusiasm theme song. Trevor's screaming face was already a meme. The caption read, "When the vibes don't pay the rent." By 2:00 p.m., Vortex Innovations stock had dropped 14%. By 4:00 p.m., the board of directors issued a press release. We are aware of the logistical challenges at today's event. We are conducting an internal review. Mr. Trevor Phillips has been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation. Administrative leave, the corporate euphemism for we are changing the locks and waiting for the right moment to claim cause. At 5:00 p.m. my phone rang. It was Mr. Henderson, the CEO. I let it go to voicemail. At 5:05 p.m. it rang again. The general counsel, Linda. I answered on the third ring. What do you want, Linda? Timothy? She sounded exhausted, her voice stripped of its usual corporate polish. We need to talk. The board is freaking out. They want to know what it will take to reinstate the lease. The bank is calling their line of credit. I took a sip of whiskey. The ice clinked against the glass. Clause 14C is irreversible, Linda. You know that. The land rights have reverted to Highland Land Holdings. Timothy, please. We can't move the headquarters. The cost would bankrupt us. There has to be a number. Name it. There is a number, I agreed. And I don't want money. Well, I do, but that is negotiable. Paused, letting the silence draw out. I want full severance for myself, tripled. I want Miller HVAC paid in full, plus interest, plus a retainer for the next 5 years. I want every vendor Trevor Stiff paid by Monday. Don't. Consider it done. What else? She said instantly. The lack of negotiation was telling. I continued, looking out at the desert sunset, feeling the power shift from them to me, the ultimate triumph of boring competence. I want the lease renegotiated. Triple the rent, retroactive to October 1st. And the new contract designates a specific property management firm to handle all operations, maintenance, and compliance for the building. Which firm? She asked, sounding wary. Mine, I said. Sanderson Logistics LLC. I just filed the papers an hour ago. There was a long silence on the other end, punctuated only by my steady breathing. You want us to hire you back as a consultant, manage the building we fired you from. No, Linda. I don't want you to hire me. I am the landlord's agent now. You don't hire me, you pay me. And if you don't like the vibe of the new contract, you can move your furniture out to the street. I have tow trucks on standby. She sighed, a deep, defeated sound. I'll send the paperwork over. I hung up the phone. The sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in violent shades of orange and red. I wasn't an employee anymore. I wasn't a legacy issue. I was the one holding the keys. I thought about Trevor. He would never understand. He thought business was about branding, about noise, about superficial flair. He didn't understand that business is about the plumbing. It is about the wires in the walls. It is about the boring, dusty contracts in the basement. If you respect the foundation, the house stands. If you try to paint Arctic gray over the cracks, the house falls on you. I raised my glass to the empty desert. "Pivot," I whispered, and took a long drink. It burned, and it tasted exactly like victory. The Ferrari was still in the impound lot. It would stay there until Monday. I had a feeling Monday was going to be the most profitable day of my career.